Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Move Crush Count. I'm your host, Scott Joseph. Move Crush Count is proudly sponsored by J&L Marketing, the digital and direct marketing agency that helps you outsmart your competition so you don't have to outspend them. Do me a favor. Visit J&L Marketing today. Make sure you do it after the show today so you can see how they'll help you move the crowd, crush the competition, and count the money. Today, we are excited to have a very special guest with us, Stephen Turner. Stephen's been a very successful businessman. He's had a 35-year career with UPS. He's the COO of Beyond Resilience and president of Flow Business Solution. It's his dedication to leading employees to success and, more importantly, valuing their individual lives. That's a reason that we're going to be talking to him today. In this episode, we're going to talk everything about how to resolve employee disengagement, we're going to learn how to improve employee engagement, boost productivity, and create a positive company culture. So let's jump right in and welcome to the show, Stephen Turner.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here. I love talking about this topic. It's my heart, actually. So I'm glad to be here.
You know what? We do a lot of different leadership retreats, as you can see over my shoulder here, with Business Bourbon and Cigars. And ultimately, Stephen, no matter what topic or how narrow we try to get some of the mastermind topics or sessions, at some point, almost all of them lead back to something to do with leadership and or company culture, which go hand in hand. So I'm excited about this topic. I'm excited to not only for our audience to learn from you, but myself. So a lot of times I ask these questions based on, all right, what do I want to know? How do I get better? So hopefully the audience is just like me. So, right. and want to know the same info. So tell us a little bit, let's get started. Tell us a little bit more about your experience with UPS and then how you became a champion, I guess, for employees and trying to get them to become more successful.
Yeah. Well, the answer to both those questions is actually the same. When I got started at UPS, I went into management there when I was 20 years old. I had worked as an hourly person for a year and then got an opportunity to lead one of the operations, the package operations. And I inherited something that I really wasn't expecting, because I didn't expect it to happen quite so quickly. And that is that at the ripe old age of 20, the people that reported to me were older than I was. And when you're in your 40s and 50s, nobody cares. But when you're 20 and 21 and 22, it matters. So I had to come into this with a realization that there could be some natural resistance to the fact that I got this opportunity. So I had two things going for me. Number one, my mother worked at a local store that you would recognize the name if I told you who it was. And she came back.
You're not going to tell us?
No, I'm not going to tell you, because it happened almost 50 years ago. So maybe they're different today.
All right.
But she'd come home telling me the stories of how they're treated. And I said to myself, well, I'm not going to do it that way. So then when I got started, I thought of the situation I was in, and I made a decision on day one that stuck with me for 34 years at UPS. And that was, I was going to treat them the way I'd like to be treated. So if I would always remember who they are and the shoes they're in and where they are in their life, which is, again, 20 to 22, 23-year-old college students, that I would be the most successful if I would just take that position. And it worked out so well that I stuck with it for the rest of my career. And no matter where
Go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
No matter what type of operation I was in, because I did cover three different groups of UPS people in the big picture. I covered operations for 5 years. I moved into finance and accounting for 17 years. And then moved into the technology side for the remaining 13 years. And the approach worked everywhere with all people, including I was in Europe for 5 years during UPS's international expansion, the initial phase of it. and it works over there. So, cultures vary, but hearts don't. People are people.
Yeah, and I love good processes, um, good ideas, whatever it is.
Mhm.
So many times people think that can't work here, but the fact that you say, "Hey, no matter what team I was involved with within UPS or what even now what country, uh, treating people right, doing things the right way, leading them the right way, good
Mhm.
leadership, it applies to any vertical, it applies to any team, it's across the board, it's universal. You agree? I mean,
Absolutely. And in fact, that's why good leadership skills, recommendations, approaches work with everybody. Because if they don't work with everybody, they're not universal.
yeah,
And that's not to say you can't find certain situations where you need to tweak certain things here and there. But at the end of the day, people just want to be treated well and respected as being individuals, rather than just almost like robots. I hate to put it that
yeah.
way, but sometimes you get treated like robots.
We've got a frequent listener, good friend as well, Michael Porro, an outstanding leader in his own right. Leaders create culture, culture drives behavior, and behavior produces results.
Right.
So he's always got good input into the show. So let me put that down. Not stuck up there. It won't let me. It won't let me remove his comment. Oh, there it goes.
All right. Let's just talk about that just for a second.
Yeah.
Every leader creates their own culture. Now, the degree to which you have the size of your group. And so when a supervisor, a frontline supervisor, like I was when I was 20 years old, gets started, my entire work group, my sphere of influence were those 10 to 20 people that I led in my first few months there. And that you'll take that to the next group of people you work with. That's your culture. Now,
Yeah.
it's very convenient that, if you're in your own business, like we have here, and as the business grows, my leadership becomes the culture of the organization, or my wife's piece of the puzzle as well. So this is the reason I say this is because a leader does not have to have the perfect organization culture. The leader can function inside the culture. Now, granted, there's an impact of the culture, but I have never ever found where I was impacted by the culture I may have moved into. I moved 7 times at UPS, all over the place in the 3 different organizations, district, region, and corporate levels. And as much as geography will vary somewhat, because of the local. I mean, if you go south in the United States, you get a different slice of business than you do in the north. It's just different. But the approaches work everywhere because we're still people.
That's
And
right.
we're all built to be
I like what you said. I like what you said early on, learning from at a very early age from your mom. I mean, I'm not going to do it that way. I think there's so much we can learn. I can tell you when I started J&L marketing, I took a very similar approach to that. That's why I wrote that down. That's why I can remember thinking, I remember coming from a sales organization, being in sales and thinking to myself, I wish they'd quit doing this to me. As a salesperson, right? That always most of the time that's talking about pay plans and other things like that. So when I set things up, I was very sales focused in what I was trying to do, but I wanted to make sure that the systems and the processes that I put in place as we started to add employees, these were things that I would enjoy and I would appreciate. And not that it was all centered around my wants and my values, but I definitely wanted to make sure, why would I put anything into place that demotivated me as an employee, right?
Exactly.
And I think we can learn from the good and from the bad. And I think that was an important point that you made. What do you think are the main reasons that employees get disengaged?
Well, the biggest reason from my perspective is because leaders do not listen. Employees come in, when you consider the life cycle of an employee, and I believe, and it's interesting, I'm telling you this because I'm doing a presentation on this next week at the Chamber of Commerce, that employee retention requires engagement on the part of the employee, or you're going to lose them. Now, their ability to engage is based on your openness to the engagement, because we are dictating the environment. So when somebody first gets started and they are on their first day of employment, the engagement process and the retention process starts right there.
Yeah.
People are the most moldable on day one.
Yeah.
If we treat them correctly and take them along, and I won't get into the details in this, but take them along a solid learning cycle so they can become successful in their work. And then we go to the next section, which is now that you know what you're doing and you feel comfortable with it, and we've satisfied two of the employee desires at that point, and that is that people want to be part of a team and know where they fit, obviously. And number two, they want to be successful at their own work. When you have people that are successful at their own work, you're in a position now to take it to the next level, which is sit down and you talk with the employee and find out, where are you? I mean, what would you like to accomplish? I think you should get a feel for that at an interview process before anybody's hired. But the nurturing of an employee through their life in the business, and it's ongoing. It just changes over time as far as, how we build people up. At the end of the day, it's as long as an employee feels like they have the opportunity for success and that we care about them as individuals. I had a friend of mine gave me this statement one day. He said, I think a good question for people is to answer this question. Are employees a line item on your income statement or an asset on your balance sheet?
Yeah. And
how do we treat them? I could talk about this forever, so stop me when you want.
Well, that's an important thing, because I can remember one of the first pieces of advice that I got that I paid attention to only from a productivity and making sure I didn't throw people at problems as we started to scale and grow. But it can be misunderstood. And that piece of advice was, people are your biggest liability. And the only point they were trying to make at that was they can be your biggest expense on the sheet.
Right.
And when you have that mindset, and if you approach it strictly as numbers like that, you're never going to accomplish the culture that you're talking about here.
That's correct. Absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the things I advise leaders is that as you run your business, focus on the products and the services you provide. Focus on training the employees who are providing those services and products, and let profits be your reward, not the goal. Because if profits are the goal, we don't run the business the way it's supposed to. We lose the focus on the employee's role in actually making it happen, because we are only as successful as they are.
The Michael Porak goes back to a comment. We're getting a lot of comments early on, so this is obviously a good topic, and we're hitting some.
That's right.
We got some people interested in this. So Michael says, we always get the right results, to your point, when we do the right things.
Exactly. That's correct.
Responsibility and trust for your employees. Build the foundation of trust from them, giving your customers that same feeling when they walk in the door in any business. That's from George from LinkedIn. Here's a good question from Michael. Did UPS have a culture statement? It's a hard question to answer. He asked the same thing. I have to say, he asked the same thing about J&L, and I'm not putting that one up there because I would be struggling with that as well.
I would have to say, I mean, it's been a long, long time since I read that, but I'll put it this way. Their approach towards people was always what I just described. That people are, when you look at UPS as a delivery business, so how much of that business is manual and by people? All of it, right? We have trucks and packages, but the people are the most important part of the business because they are number one, the number one customer service person to every customer. Now we have salespeople and we have customer service people, obviously, that perform that role, but the person that the customer sees every single day is the driver. They are the most important people in the business.
I have to give you a funny story that it's good and it's bad from UPS, specific to my driver at my house.
Mm-hmm.
So my dog barks nonstop at anything that walks by the door. I mean, it's an Amazon package, UPS, it doesn't matter what's coming,
Mm-hmm.
the mail person, and it's a high-pitched bark. And so, I work from home every now and then, and it gets annoying. So one day the UPS guy comes, all right, and dog's barking. I open the door, dog's right there, dog's all friendly with him, and lo and behold, he reaches into his pocket and pulls out a treat.
Dog treat.
He gives a dog treat. So loved it. It's great because he loves my dog and stuff like that. But I thought, no wonder my dog barks at everybody that walks by. He thinks it's getting a treat every time.
Yeah, a lot of drivers do that.
Yeah,
and they're they like the dogs, but they're taking care of themselves as well, right? You're creating a positive relationship there with the protectors of the house.
That's exactly right. I want to take a question real quick from Mia in the audience. What can a manager do to help employees avoid job burnout? And she's got her own gig right now. And how do I avoid it myself?
There's a long answer to those two questions, but I'll give you the short version.
All right.
Usually, one of the things that contributes to employee burnout is the fact that they don't get a chance to talk about the fact they're getting burned out. And if good leaders, let me just come at it this way. We have what I call the inner circle. And it's also a phrase I just discovered that John Maxwell uses as well.
Yeah.
The inner circle are those employees, I'm going to look at it from the employee perspective now, are your direct reports. If you just think about this for a second, if every single management person would take care of their direct reports, the organization would run a whole lot smoother. Now, let's take that into your question.
Correct.
If we're concerned with our employees' personal concern, we will provide opportunities for employees to talk about being burned out. There is a thing that superhuman effort doesn't last forever. You're really good employees, the ones that you nurtured and developed and grew and continue growing, because it's a continual process. When you take the time to listen to what they have to say, first of all, they're going to go over and above what their job is. It's the result of having people that follow you as opposed to resisting you because you're trying to manage them.
Yeah.
Employees who are managed resist. Employees who are led follow. Okay, now you take that employee, and
I hope everybody wrote that down. That's a great thing you just said there. Say that again.
Yeah. Employees who are managed resist. Employees who are employees who are led follow. Now, since we're talking about that, let me digress. I had a conversation with a lady about 4 weeks ago, and we were talking about what we did. And I got her side and she learned what I did. When I talked about this comment to her, I said it exactly the same thing, managed versus led. And she came back to me with a statement that was so perfect. I actually asked her, I said, "Oh my God, that's great. Can I use it?" She says, "Absolutely." And this was it. She spoke it from the employee's perspective. And she said this: "So what you're saying is, I obey my manager, but I follow my leader." And I thought, oh my God, I mean, that's exactly what it is. Now, what happens when you're in a situation of obeying versus following?
Yeah.
What does the person that's obeying do? They do
Just enough.
what they're told to do. Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you're following, what do? You do the best you can to take on the
That's right.
challenges of the day. Now,
Well, and sometimes when you're following, you're part of a team. First off, when you're
absolutely.
following, you're part of a team, and you're doing things for the greater good, whether that's the
Right.
greater good of your client, the business, your team, whatever it might be. Versus, I think when you're obeying, as I said earlier, you're just kind of doing just enough to get by.
Yeah. Now, when you're in a situation, I will come back and answer the lady's question, but when you're in a position where it's an obey scenario, this is where employee engagement starts to deteriorate. So we can bring anybody on, get them started, take care of them when they first get trained and all that kind of stuff. But when you get to the point where they're in a potential, they could feel like they're being taken advantage of, and they feel overworked, whether they are or not, is still a perception, because perception is reality until proven otherwise. So we always have to know the perception the employees have, not just what the facts are. So when somebody gets the feeling of being overused, feel like they're burned out, and we can also feel burned out, the solution to it is relatively the same, regardless of whether it's them or us. And that is, you have to stop. As a leader, listen to the employee for what they say. You may find out something they're not doing correctly, they're getting too concerned with, or whatever. A lot of it's a dialogue, and then they okay, I got it. Thanks for that input. We have to do the same thing. Yeah. We get burned out, and as an entrepreneur, and it happens many times. Sometimes you just got to step back, take a look at what we're doing. Are we doing things we really don't need to do? Are we doing urgent things instead of important things? And we have to reset. We got to recenter ourselves. But
so I think Michael brings up a good thing here. Ask better questions. But if I'm hearing you, the biggest thing that you have is making sure you have frequent communication with your team, with individually, with not just as a team, but individually, and try to draw that out of them. But let's just say I'm one of those employees, kind of first came on board, was all excited, couldn't wait to show you and accomplish and take my career to the next level. And a couple of years goes by, and or whatever time period, and I'm starting to get a little disengaged. Maybe you're noticing it as my leader, but I'm not the type of person, no matter what you ask, where I feel comfortable expressing that. So what are some of the warning signs that you would recognize in an employee like me? And by the way, that is not me, but
I understand.
For the sake of this.
So I have dialogue with people all the time. And so if somebody's in a rut, I'm going to notice it, because their response isn't the same. The joy in their face isn't there. And, that can happen here and there, a day here, a day there, because, there are still they're still dealing with their personal lives as well. And stuff can go crazy. They find out their kid did something they shouldn't have done, stuff like that. Yeah. Now, I had a situation that happened like this. I had an employee, and this goes way back to my earlier full-time years at UPS, but she was an excellent employee, and all of a sudden her work started to tank. And I'm watching it for a while. And so I decided I was going to find out, if what's wrong. And I always take the assumption that I am there to fix something, right? That the source could be me. So I asked her to come and we'd have a chat. So we talked about it. And this is what ultimately turned out to be this. It was a personal issue. She was having a massive argument with her mother-in-law, and she didn't know what to do. And it was on her brain constantly.
Yeah.
So we just talked about it. I or anybody else could have thrown out the same statement I made. I gave her a recommendation. She came back 3 days later and said, it worked. Everything's great. Now, if I hadn't been willing to take the time to go sit off on the side someplace and try to determine what was possibly wrong, because it could have been something that I needed to fix, right? We'd have never had the conversation. So putting up the barriers and basically saying, hey, you're not doing the job. You need to get back at it and take that type of attitude. Nothing happens. It just gets worse.
Why do you think that maybe there are managers or leaders out there, and really I would put this more on managers, not leaders. I think leaders probably wouldn't do this. Why do you think that they avoid those conversations?
Because they're afraid of what they have to say, or that they don't have an answer. See, now, a sign of a good leader is you don't have to have an answer to every question. You just have to be smart enough to say, I don't quite have an answer for that. Let me check into it and come back later. But in walking into an unexpected conversation, especially with an employee that is maybe having an issue, is a scary event. I'd say I've done it a couple of times. And it's how we react to what they say. And here's something that we can easily do. We bring someone together and we're going to have this conversation like the one I had with this lady. And while she's talking, I can be trying to second guess what she's going to say. And then in my mind, I'm coming up with an answer to the wrong question.
Yeah.
And then the conversation goes nowhere. So we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. We should use them accordingly.
Yeah.
So anytime that we need to have a chat with somebody, and it certainly happens, we have to be willing to listen to what they say as opposed to prejudge what they're going to say, and we come up with the wrong answer. And it can easily happen. So, but nobody likes those kinds of conversations, because someplace along the line there's always an expectation, like I did with the lady with her mother-in-law. Was I thought it could be me. It could be something with her work setup that's not working, but I have to find out what it is, because it's impacting her and her success, not to mention the business. So,
well, and I think there's managers, leaders, they're no different than any other human, right? Sometimes they worry about these conversations and they worry about things that, to your point, had nothing to do with you. It had nothing to do with the business in the scenario you gave. It was her own personal life and something outside of it. But I think managers and leaders sometimes think this is going to be a confrontational, and if you're not built to address those type of things and know how to handle them right, disengagement is going to continue.
There's another risk in the scenario with the young lady. She had a personal issue.
Yeah.
And I could have easily said, keep your personal things at home. When you're at work, you need to do the work. Well, that doesn't go anywhere, because nobody leaves.
By the way, there's a reason that everyone that's either watching or listening will hear that and be like, yeah, I've heard that before. That's because that happens more commonly than we would think. It's horrible.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's true.
Yeah.
And there's now I think when we get into situations like this where I want to say, I don't want to deal with your personal stuff, leave it at home, you're at work, we have to think back to ourselves. Do we do that? Does my personal life always stay out there? No.
Yeah.
We are in it all the time. And we just have to give people a break. But again, a lot of this stuff comes back. If you're willing to listen, you'll find out the right information. And lots of times it's a heart issue, and you'll have the right answer.
Well, and that's what I was sitting here thinking. It requires some empathy. You got to have some empathy. And if you're not good at that, if you're not an empathetic person, you're going to struggle, especially in today's day and age, leading anyone.
I would go so far as to say that if you don't have a degree of empathy, you're not gonna be successful. You can't,
Yeah,
because people are different.
correct.
And I also like to talk about, when everybody's got different personalities. And despite the fact that the business needs to be done in a certain way, yes, there has to be standardized procedures. I mean, you can't do the same thing 5 different ways, right?
Yep.
However, it's still a set of different personalities that are executing the work.
Yeah.
Now, when a group of people get together, you get a leader and they've got 5, 6, 7, 8 people, whatever it is. Who is the one that has to adjust for the differences? It's the leader's call. The leader's, I should say, responsibility. It's the leader's responsibility to adjust to all the people in their environment. They're not going to do it.
Yeah.
We have to do it.
Squire just brought up a great comment to what we're talking about here. Leave your personal stuff at home. That what we were just talking about is just a talking point that people do to not get involved or to get out of talking about real issues.
Right. That's correct.
Pretty spot on. Yeah.
Yep.
So, all right. So you've talked about more frequent conversations with individuals on your team. You've talked about asking better questions. You've talked about making sure you actually listen and address those things. Outside of those, what are just 1 or 2 other practical steps that a company or business or a leader could do to improve employee engagement?
Well, the first thing, to be honest with you, is to recognize that you have the issue, because it's too easy. And this is a topic, apart from having a solid leader in and of themselves. Right. When I got started at UPS, I didn't claim to be a superstar, but it worked pretty well for the 34 years I was there. But there's certain situations in organizations that are real issues today. And this engagement thing plays a big part. Number one is this: the cost of employee turnover is massive, more than most people think. That's one thing. Number two, at this stage of the game, and I think most people can relate to this statement, we are in a situation, we have 3.4% unemployment, supposedly. Now, that number is low for unusual reasons at this point, right? Yeah. But 3.4% unemployment reflects the fact that those are the people looking for work. We consider 4% full employment. Now, also, there was an organization called Corn Enterprises, I think it is. They do lots of studies. They did a study that globally, we're going to be short of people for the next few years. The only country not short of people is India. Everybody else is going to be short of people. So it would be really a good idea to cut back employee turnover. Number one, save the money of replacing them. I'll give you an example of that in a second. And number two, you're not going to have enough people to possibly sustain or grow a business. And there's some ugly stuff out there in the corporate world today about the fact that there's some real CEOs really worried about this. So you might as well take care of the employees you have.
So, all right. So let's talk about that a little bit. So, obviously you've got to keep pushing forward. We want to constantly grow, right?
Yep.
But at the same time, we want a culture that improves employee retention, right? Reduces turnover. But it's not just about that. It's also about having a thriving culture where people are truly engaged and working towards, and they're the reason for the growth, right? That's what the ultimate leader wants their team to be the reason for business growth, whether that's their sales team, their customer service team, whatever it might be.
Yep.
How do you balance? There's a balance there. How do you balance what the company needs versus the individual needs?
Okay. That's a really good question. And that question is the reason why too many leaders avoid this question. They don't know how to answer the question.
Yeah.
But when the perfect situation is when you have an interview to bring somebody on board, get a real good feel for who they are and what they want to accomplish. Now, we know in interviews, sometimes people say what they think the leader wants to hear, right?
Right.
Okay, that's real. All right. Employee comes in, gets started, learns the job, move a little bit further. But as we start developing the person beyond their initial job, we ask them a question. Where would you like to be in 5 years? Now, there's a really good chance you're going to get a deer in the headlights look at that question because nobody ever asked the question.
Yeah.
But it opens the door to the fact that you are interested in who they are as a person, as an individual, right? Now, a question could come up where, and this happened to be once, but it was in a positive environment. So that's how I like talking about this. We may ask that question if somebody says they want to do this, that, or whatever. Now, I was at UPS at the time, and UPS has lots of internal opportunities. If you're a smaller business, you probably have less of them, but that's okay. So if someone comes in and says they want to do this, and we don't have the ability to do it within our business, we just have to be upfront with them and tell them, I can help you get along the journey, but I can't satisfy your goal at this point, right?
Yeah.
But while you're here, because I know ultimately, if we can't satisfy a need, they're going to leave.
That's right.
Now, I had a guy came to me one day at UPS, told me what he wanted to do, wanted to do something special in the tech world, which we really didn't do, though we did a lot. And we had a conversation, and he said, I want to do this sooner or later. I said, okay, more power to you. Let's help you along the way. And the day came when you left. Now, someone can come out and say, well, then you're just preparing somebody to leave. And my answer to that question every single time is always this. As much as that's a true statement, all the time they're here, they are superstars because they know I want to help them grow.
Yeah. Richard Branson has a famous quote out there. Yeah. It's better than not, or somebody has one out there. I've seen it out there. It's better than not training them and having them stay.
Well, I say that a slightly different way, and that's this. I would rather have somebody that's energetic, wants to move on
100%.
than being, I hate the word stuck, but having to have an employee that just makes it for the rest of their life.
You know what? As much as it sucks losing a great employee, I want you to think about that. At the end, when someone eventually leaves you, and let's just say both people lasted anywhere from 2 to 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That was their tenure in the organization. At the end, would you rather be relieved that they left or upset that they left? Because if you'd rather be relieved that they left, that means you spent 2 to 5 years of very mediocre or below average performance.
Yeah.
And you allowed it. I mean, quite honestly, if we look at it that way, right, we should be happy when we're upset, whether it's emotional or upset. We got to replace a loss. That means we had a good person there for whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So in fact, when this guy left, I wasn't happy that he was leaving, but he did a bang up job while he was there. And it really, actually, when the new person I brought in to take his place, all the people that he worked with, who now she was going to work with, actually helped her be successful.
Let me ask you, I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to go back to that question you asked, where do you want to be in 5 years? Because I also think there's, as a leader, if you're asking that question, whether it's in a performance review or an interview, the intent of the question, your mindset as the leader is just as important as the answer, and why you're asking the question is just as important. If you're asking that question because you want to see how this person fits into your plan, all right, over the next 5 years, that's a completely different mindset than asking to find out what makes this person tick. And it probably impacts how you're hearing it.
Yes, exactly. Now, I love the question. And ultimately, I have to pare it back from 3 to 5 down to 1 because I never thought about it. lots of people. I mean, this is kind of like somewhat natural, but there are a number of people who have never been asked the question, and unfortunately, they may have grown up in an environment where the question was never asked either. And we grow up, the education system happens to support the fact that you get in, you go to school, you learn things, you get a good job, you do the job for 45 years, and then you retire and survive on Social Security. That entire process doesn't do anything about talking about a person at an individual level and where they want to end up. The system tends to create the other. So if we're going to be good leaders, we need to get over that issue. And that's one of the reasons I do this is there are, I'll give you an example in a minute. There are so many golden nuggets out there in natural skills of people that are never nurtured. So I'll give you a quick example. One of the things I did along my career was I assumed responsibility for one of the accounting departments at UPS in one of the districts, and it didn't have the greatest reputation of success. So I had the opportunity to go in there, and it didn't take me very long to realize there's a lot of skill in this group. It just had never been tapped. So when I got started there, I really took a position of just listen to the people. I would obviously, take them on the journey, and we set some things up so we could improve. But I didn't replace a single individual.
Nice.
Because the skills were there. Nobody had been promoted from this office for a number of years. We took 5 people from that group of 100 people, and they moved on in the organization. There's so much talent. All you got to do is find it, allow it to come out. And you don't give people a chance to talk unless you ask them questions and let them respond, and do what you can. You're not going to. We can't afford to throw the goals of the business away while we're trying to create somebody to be somebody that we would never need. But you can do both at the same time. And here's another thing.
Go ahead.
Another thing that comes from this. You're building people where you can promote from within.
That's right.
And when you promote from within, you continue to nurture the culture. And this is one of the real strengths of UPS. So I was fortunate to be in this environment. But one of the reasons I got excited about business in college, when I went to work at UPS, I saw it, was the opportunity that UPS provided because of its growth. It was still didn't cover the entire 48 contiguous US yet at that point. So there were physical growth going on. But so there was opportunities for people that did well.
I was just thinking, because I'm going to go back to almost one of your very first answers to the very first question I asked, and you talked about how you were promoted very quickly. I think it was 20 years old?
20 years old, yeah.
And then you just told the story about people that you promoted 5 people, and none of these people had advanced, and it was contributing to I want you to think, when people have a career path and they are delivering results at a high level, and all of a sudden the company lives up to its promise to its employees and people are advancing.
Mm-hmm.
I think go back in time. All right. So when you were 20, think about the psyche. What does that do to you mentally, right? As our teammates, as our employees are out there, when they see, I guess, the fruit of their labor, right? They're sitting there and like, wow, this worked. I busted my butt. They didn't care how old I was. That wasn't a requirement. It was about results. It was about behaviors, you know? So I just, that stuck with me. And I was also going to sit there and think, while you were talking, I'm sitting there thinking, when someone's disengaged, one of the things I think we underestimate is when they go home, if they've got a spouse, that spouse takes a lot of times, just like we talked about earlier, don't bring your, or it's a mistake to say, don't bring your home into your personal into work. I can promise you it's very hard for people, especially if they're disgruntled, to not take their work into their personal. And when that happens, now you've got an influencer, not a silent influencer, but an influencer behind the scenes that's constantly saying, why do you work there? Why do you stay there? Why aren't you finding another job? And then any little thing, it's always.
Let's turn that around just a second, because I actually use this exact scenario to challenge leaders to change their lives. And that is, when you go home at night and your significant other asks you this question, how was your day, dear? What kind of an answer can you give? If you give a positive answer, the impact on the rest of the night for your family is positive. If you give them a junk answer, like you just mentioned, then that becomes the focus from your input into the conversation, as opposed to talking about Johnny's football game, right?
Yeah.
Now, we want all of our employees to be able to give a yes answer to that question. So I want the managers to be able, for all the management people that ever reported to me, I definitely want them to go home and say, I had a good day. And, if they can't, we have a chat. We need to get her over this. Now there's times, there's challenges, there's chaotic times and all that kind of stuff. But when they're seasonal as opposed to continual, families will put up with it. It's when it's continual.
Yeah. You always hear about work-life balance. Yeah. The only people that complain about work-life balance are the people that are disgruntled or disengaged. Mm-hmm. Because if you're going home and you're talking to your spouse and you're engaged and you're liking, you enjoy the leaders and the teammates that you work with, and you enjoy your job, and you feel like you're part of the reason for the success. A lot of times the hours you put in, mm-hmm. those conversations, work-life balance, never come up in those scenarios. They only come up with what we're trying to correct here on this show, correct?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So, all right, let me ask you this. I want to be respectful of your time as well. So how do you measure whether or not, obviously you can measure your turnover, your retention of employees, but how do you measure the effectiveness of whatever engagement strategy you might put into place?
Okay. There's three pieces to this puzzle. And let me, I don't know how much time I have left, but let me come at it from this direction.
We're good.
Okay. There's a statistic that's been around since 1990 that has never changed. That is that 85% of people are not fully engaged in their work.
Wow.
It's never changed. Now, when you consider the cycle of this, so every year Gallup reports the number. Every year organizations get excited for, a couple of months. Yeah, I'm going to do something about that. And people like me, business coaches or whatever, stand up and say, this is what you need to do to fix this issue. They get excited for 2 months, fall back to the status quo, and the cycle begins again 9 months later. Why? It's because there are two pieces of the puzzle that are not identified. Number one, there are too many organizations that do not know where their employees stand on this issue. If you don't know where your employees stand, there is no way you could ever make a roadmap to get you from where you are to where you're going. It's like saying, how do you get to New York City? Well, the first question is, where are you starting from? Right? So this same scenario exists in the business. Okay, now moving on to your question. So when a CEO finds out where their organization is and they map out a strategy to get from here to here, one of the things that small businesses don't need to do, but corporations need to do, there needs to be some statistics and some structure to allow accountability to be recorded so that the CEO and his team can see that everything's rolling and being done. I'll give you a couple of examples. So if one of the things an organization needs to do is they need to have more effective review periods with their employees. Now, the annual review is one of the most disgruntled, despised events in an employee's life. There's no respect for them. You want to ask me how I'm doing one day for 1 hour out of a whole year. So that's out.
Yeah.
The whole review process is individual and it needs to reflect the needs of the employee, but no more than 6 months between the reviews. And you don't get to the 6-month gap until you've been working with somebody for, a couple of years. So anyway, one could establish a schedule of reviews, right? What's scheduled for the next 6 months? There is a thing I like. It's called a skills inventory. Now, when you have a group of people where people reporting to you are doing different types of jobs, right? Now, everybody could do the same job. I mean, it's easier for the manager because he only has to know one job. But when you've got people doing many different things, it's good to know how many people in your organization are actually trained to do that skill. So you can set up a process by which we're going to intentionally cross-train people so that we create flexibility, so that when the vacation season comes from June to September, that we have people that can fill all those jobs that are vacant for a short period of time. And I tell you that from experience. I was the replacement one summer at UPS when I took over one of the offices I ran, because there was no cross training.
Yeah.
So I filled in for one summer, and then after that, I made sure everybody was cross trained. So now a skills inventory gives you in a flash the skill level of each person and how many people know each skill. So that's just another tool. But when you put the strategy together, you just need to create some KPIs, key performance indicators, that can be reported structurally every month, so that people know that what you just trained and instructed and expect is actually happening.
No, good points. All right. So we've talked a lot about what people can do. What are some of the most common mistakes that businesses do when they're trying to improve engagement?
They do not address a major issue because we're looking at a tactic as opposed to a strategy. The thing that has to be dealt with, number one, is not whether somebody held a review, but that the manager is leading from his heart.
Yeah.
That there's empathy, as we talked before, that there is a desire to want to work and develop people. You have to be a people person. And I know what happens when organizations want to take this on, because it's a big issue. There are going to be some people that don't fit.
Yeah.
Some will, some won't. Some will change, some won't. And those that won't are going to probably end up with a different assignment.
Yeah.
But
you have to understand that some people, they might be the right person for the company.
Yeah.
Could be in the wrong
place.
Yeah, just could be in the wrong spot. So there's different ways to look at those individuals as well.
So when I work with companies, the first person I talk to about this topic is the leader.
Yeah.
Where are you in this? I'm kind of being pretty direct on this statement at the moment. Obviously, I work through it, not one statement. But I examine the leadership team on where they are on people leadership. And if all they're doing is managing instead of leading, they need to move from the manager to the leader category, or the rest of the stuff's not going to matter because they're not going to have their heart in it. And when it comes to people, it's a relationship business.
If you're a parent, there's not a lot of differences between the two. And I'll give an example of what I mean between that. You're busy at home. Your little girl comes up to you. She's got questions.
Yep.
The manager says, "I'm busy. Let's talk about this later," and dismisses. Whereas really that relationship, that father-daughter or father-son or mother-daughter-son, is the most important one you have. It's the
Yeah.
reason you're a parent. When you're in work, if you're a leader, the most important job you have is working. If your responsibility is to lead people and to elevate their abilities and to get, productivity, make them more efficient, more engaged, all the above. How many times as leaders, even in the non-scheduled meetings, do we have people that ask us questions and or we recognize something that could be improved and we start to coach? But rather than just listening, it is all about just do this, this, avoid the questions because we don't have time. We have to be, and the excuse that leaders will use and or managers will use at the time is, listen, I'm swamped. I don't have time to communicate this the way I should. I've got to be real direct.
Mhm.
Is that
That
it's no
happens.
different than the parenting situation. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Exactly.
and so hopefully if anybody leaves this show today, that's an easy thing to consciously recognize when you're doing it.
Mhm.
Because we know it's unnatural. If we're a good leader, when we're doing that, there is something inside of you that says, you're doing it wrong. And you just
Right.
got to take a second and understand and prioritize the relationship and the employee over whatever you were currently doing at that time.
Exactly. Now, let me give you, I had a crazy situation happen. I was a supervisor at UPS in the accounting department, and I was doing my thing and responsible for what I was responsible for. And I had an issue. And so I brought it up, and the controller we had at that point in time, and I won't give you his name because it was more an image than reality, because he turned out to be the CFO of the organization at a future time, right?
Yeah.
But we have to be careful of situations like this. I came to him with an issue about something that I was responsible for. It was important to me because I wanted to do it right. And he brushed me off by saying that wasn't important. And I said something back to him. I could have been whacked, I suppose, but I told him, I says, it is to me.
Yeah.
And it was just enough to where he paused and he realized what he had said.
Yeah.
And backed up a little. But we have to be willing to hear and listen to what they say. Now, if they're getting upset about something that's truly not important, that's one thing. But when an employee is excited about what they are responsible for, you can never tell them it's not important in your immediate eyes because you're dealing with something else. You can't go there. Always have to recognize the importance of what someone says, even if it turns out that you have to have a chat later to kind of diffuse the issue. You have to.
I love what you just said, because it also is a great segue into the final question.
Okay.
As an employee, because we have a lot of people that are watching or listening to the show that maybe they're not leading a team, right? But they learn different things from the show or different episodes, depending on the topics. If you're an employee, you owe it to yourself to do what you just did.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of employees that would never speak up and allow that to happen. And I think you can do that in a respectful way. And so my question was going to be, how can employees themselves take ownership of their engagement and contribute to the success of the company? And so the reason I think that kind of goes into this is because if you allow that to happen to you, that eventually sends you down the path to disengagement, right? So that's one tool you could do, is speak up. And if something, don't let it fester.
Well, the leadership team has to create that atmosphere.
Good point.
They have to, go to employees, and, I've had people have done this to me. I say, if you have an issue, ask me, because I would rather talk about it than have it bother you.
Yeah.
Because ultimately it's going to impact their work. If it's important to them, it's important to them. It may not be important to us, but if it's important to them. And I'll give you a quick one here. When I moved into the accounting department at UPS as the general accounting supervisor for a while, I had one of the long-term employees was there, and he asked me something interesting. He showed you his frustration. He said, "Are you another person coming in and walk right in here on a white horse and solve all of our problems?" And I said, "No, that's not my intention. My intention is to listen to you." And do you know that flipped the relationship instantly? And then if you follow that up with listen to what they say, find something that you can do to help them with their issue. Yeah. You now create a communication link that is very valuable, because sooner or later, he's going to bring something to you that really needs attention.
I could remember back in my 20s, I was working with my brother, and it was my company, and he was phenomenal. And so, but there were times, when you're leading a company, especially when you're younger and immature, or less mature, you could sit there and say, all your ideas are, you think are great, right? So I'm like, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. No involvement in anybody. We're doing this. Here's why. Mm-hmm. And he's got objections to it. And of course, the salesperson in me is like, no, that's not going to be an issue because of this, and here's what we're going to do. And I'm just ramming this in, right? And he finally goes, because he's a phenomenal salesperson, he goes, this is to the point that the comment you just made. He goes, "You're not going to convince me or change the way I feel about this. This is how I feel. I can't help the way I feel about it." And it made me take a step back. And I was like, all right, I've got to reapproach this. But the good salesperson in it is he quickly learned that line worked every time on me. So that was the downside for me.
Yeah.
So, all right. So any final thoughts that you would give business leaders out there, or even employees, whatever you think would be most valuable to our audience, that would help them be more engaged, or have our teammates be more engaged?
I think if from the engagement perspective, which we work on a lot here, engagement truly is motivated at the leader's level, because engagement only comes as a result of what you're willing to engage in.
Yeah.
And that's why I say include personal as well as business things. And if you are, we are relational. We were created to be relational people. When I talk about inner circle, there are 3 sections to the inner circle. So what I'm saying applies to all 3 of these groups. Number 1 is your family, because we as parents, we have a responsibility to our family. And again, inner circle are people that are in your life all the time, not on and off. So your family's always there. Your direct reports in your business are always there. I mean, we spend more hours with our employees than we do with our family.
Yep.
And number 3, your true friends, the ones that are with you through thick and thin. So if we have dialogue with people in our inner circle, so that there's open, free conversation, which I'm really looking at the business side now for this, you'll be successful. People want to talk, they want to be heard, and they want to be considered. They don't want to be treated like doormats.
Yeah. That's a great thing. That's a great way to wrap the show today. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to this episode of Move, Crush, Count, where we explored how to lead employees to success.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing guest today, Stephen Turner. If you want to learn more about Stephen and his expertise, I want you to visit his website. And I will make sure I get this right as well, because I got 2 different ones. I'm going to give them both. Stephen-Turner.com. Still work? Or do you want them going to the one we got flowing at the bottom here?
Do flowbusinesssolution.com.
All right. So flow dash business.
Or it's Steve, email steve@flowbusinesssolution.com is the email.
All right. And so we'll get these links in the show notes. For the people that are downloading it as a podcast. Obviously, if we're watching live here on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, flow-business-solution.com. You'll be able to reach him there. If you enjoyed this episode, please visit movecrushcount.com so you can catch up on all our previous episodes, and that way you don't miss any future ones. Also, follow us on Instagram, join our Facebook group, tune into our live streams whenever we have them on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Stay connected with the community. Special thanks to our sponsor, J&L Marketing, for their support. Check out their website at jnlmarketing.com. Learn how you can outsmart your competition so you don't have to outspend them. Please rate and review us. So we don't pay anything to promote the show. It's all organic growth. So the more you can share episodes to people that you think it might benefit, please do so. But we pay attention to everything you say in those reviews to help improve the show, and rating helps us a long way as well. So please do so, especially if they're 5-star. Those are the ratings we want the most.
Yeah, of course.
Stephen, thank you very much. Thank you very much to the MCC Nation tuning in today. We'll see you all on the next episode.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.